Secretary General, thank you very much. We're very grateful to you for joining us today.
It's a great pleasure to see you. Merhaba.
Thank you. The summit next week in Istanbul, the Humanitarian Summit, it's the first of its kind. I gather it's very much part of your personal initiative. Why is it so important that we should have such an event, and what do you hope to achieve from it?
With all these crises and natural disasters striking the international community, the number of people who have been displaced and who have been affected by these violent crises as well as natural disasters have come to an unmanageable situation. 125 million people need daily assistance, and among them 60 million people have become displaced or refugees. The level of international support has been much less than needed. That is why we decided that we really need to mobilize global political will for global action. That's the main purpose of World Humanitarian Summit, which will be the first ever in 70 years history of the United Nations.
What is wrong with the system? What is wrong with the world's humanitarian system? What is the priority that needs to be fixed?
It's not wrong or right per se. It's the magnitude, the scale of humanitarian crisis and needs. There's a huge gap between these and resources available. International community, world leaders have been generously responding. For example, a Turkish government, they have been generous supporter in humanitarian issues. But now, with all this Syrian crisis continuing for 6 years, and there are so many crises, what we call fires, happening, at least 17 places around the world now, and then it is only the people who have been affected. They have become just helpless, defenseless. That's why international community must think in a new way, revitalize the commitment. That's why this humanitarian summit is necessary.
As I understand it, that there is a shortfall, there is an ongoing problem of finance, of getting the money that you need to respond in the way that you need to. But as I also understand it from reading into the intentions of the summit, you want to try and change the general approach, less response and more local capacity building. Tell us more about that.
That's true. We have to change the way we have been doing. This business as usual type, whenever there's happens something, then we appealed and we got some responses. But depending upon the issues, the level of response has been dramatically different, from a very high response, sometimes less than 10% of response. Therefore, there is no difference between those people who need this support, immediately, daily life-saving support. That's why we need to change. It would be much better if we find some ways to end and prevent and end this crisis. But that's what we have to do through negotiation, facilitation. But in the meantime, we have to support these people. So we have to have a global action, much higher, much stronger way.
The skeptics, and there are many, say that this kind of event raises expectations but can't deliver tangible change. How do you respond to that kind of accusation?
If we do not take action now, then who will do it? Of course, I am conscious of some skeptics, criticism. What kind of tangible outcome of this World Humanitarian Summit in Istanbul? Of course, we may not be able to get 100% as we expected, but it is all the better and all the more necessary that we act now. Otherwise, you have to abandon so many people. Just to think about the 4 million people, refugees, Syrian refugees. Among them, more than 2.5 million people are hosted in Turkey. And Lebanon, Jordan, and Iraq, and Northern Africa, and Egypt, they all need. Then there are so many displaced people in South Sudan, Libya, Central African Republic, Mali, and elsewhere. So we have to really do something now.
You mentioned Turkey's hosting of it, obviously very important for Turkey, and I understand you've been in regular contact with President Erdogan. What does Turkey bring to the table in terms of hosting such a huge event?
Turkey has been, first of all, generous supporter in not only humanitarian but global political and development issues. That's one thing. And Turkey's strategic geopolitical location, sitting in the middle center of Middle East, Asia, Europe, it gives a good and perfect reason why it should be held in Turkey. And I really appreciate President Erdogan and his leadership and compassionate leadership who has been supporting many millions of Syrian refugees and also providing this kind of a political leadership. Yeah.
You mentioned the migration issue, which obviously Turkey's played a huge role in trying to respond to with regard to the Syrian crisis. Globally, though, as it will come up, I'm sure, next week, this migration of humanity across continents, across great distances, in the sheer numbers that we're seeing, is unprecedented. We've never seen it before. How on earth do we respond in the future to this huge shift of people?
It's true that the world has never experienced this kind of huge, massive movement of refugees and migrants at this time. Maybe since the end of Second World War. This is a crisis, global crisis. It has gone beyond the European continent. And we are talking about the numbers, but I believe that this is not the crisis of number. It's a crisis of global solidarity, crisis of compassionate leadership. If we have compassion, if we have a political will, then there is always a solution. That's why I have been urging the world leaders to resolve this migration and refugee issues on the basis of shared principle. Shared principle. It's not only a few countries who have to deal with this, like Turkey is one of the countries who are bearing the brunt of these challenges. And there are many European countries who are having the trouble. This kind of political situation really has affected their political stability issues now. That's why I have decided to convene at the General Assembly of the United Nations on September 19th, just one day before the beginning of a General Assembly, a world leaders meeting to address this issue at the global scale and drawing out some global compact, yes.
The priority surely must be, though, to resolve the issues at the root cause of people's desire to move.
That's right.
It means dealing with conflicts and responding better to epidemics. I mean, that must be the future strategy, surely.
That is why the United Nations is placing high priority on preventive diplomacy, addressing root causes, why people have to flee their homeland. I think it starts from lack of support by the government, lack of good governance, corruptive practices, the feeling of injustice and inequality among the people. When they are just feeling that they are abandoned, then they have to flee their homeland for a better opportunity. That's a human tendency. That's why I have been urging, let us address this issue from the root causes. At the same time, we have never neglect the giving life-saving support daily basis. That's what we have to do in parallel, in a comprehensive manner.